Guys, how you doing? Trucker G here again. Wasn't really planning on making this video, but I had somebody put a post up on the Facebook on the community side of the Trucker G page, and well, I'll just kind of read it. I'll read it to you. It says, it's from Jeff Young. It says, "Let's all pretend it's the good old days. We're all sitting around the bar and sharing stories. What's something you tell us about your travels?" Well, I told Jeff that I'd go ahead and just make a video on it because I really didn't want to type out a book, right? Like I told Jeff in my comment, I don't have a million stories like some of the other drivers, like some of you guys might have, you know. Throughout my whole career, I was never one to sit around, you know, inside the truck stop and shoot, well, just bowl, you know, shoot the bowl. Try to keep my language clean, guys. But yeah, I was never that guy because I don't know, I kind of get irritated by hearing the same regurgitated stories from guys that didn't really have any original stories. I'm sure you've all seen them. I mean, I've heard the same story I don't know how many times. But there is a lot of guys that do have some authentic stories, and they're good, and they make you think a lot. But as far as my story, I'll go ahead and just tell you something that kind of happened at the beginning of my career. And it's not really my story, it's more my wife's story, should I say. Like I said, I had just started trucking. I hadn't been trucking very long, and I run the same route. I ran from Phoenix, Arizona to Hunts Point, New York. I'd drop off there in Hunts Point. I'd pick up another load out in New York, head up to Washington State, drop off a load, pick up another load there in Washington, and then I would head back down to Phoenix from Washington. And I'd just keep making that same trip. You know, I'd come home for a day, maybe 2 days, and right back out. But one of my trips, I went out, and mind you, back then, we didn't have cell phones. So it wasn't like my wife could just call me or I could just call my wife. I made a point to call her each day, but it was usually at the end of the day when I shut down. And, you know, back then, a good truck driver always carried two things on him. You know, a good truck driver always carried a pin and a pocket full of change. And that pocket full of change was for those payphones, because that's what we had. Like I said, at night I'd call her each night. And it didn't stay on very long because, I mean, it was expensive to make a phone call, you know. I can't remember what it was, but it would make that pocket dwindle pretty quick. And you had to save change for calling shippers and receivers also. So, long story short, I'm out on the road. My wife gets a call from the Michigan DOT, you know, the state troopers, some detective from the state troopers of Michigan, and he asked her, you know, "Is your husband's name Gerald Johnson?" She said yes. You know, he identified himself, and she said, "Yeah, it's Gerald." And then he proceeded to ask her, "Well, does he drive a red Freightliner?" And he mentioned, you know, it was a Freightliner Classic. And, well, heck, she don't know the difference, so it didn't really matter what kind of Freightliner he said. She just knew it was a red truck back then. And she goes, "Yeah." She goes, "Ma'am," he says, "Ma'am, I'm sorry to inform you, we've found your husband's truck, and it's been abandoned, and we found signs of blood in the truck, and there's nobody around. You know, they found the ID, and my wife's crying, and she's hysterical, didn't know what to do. And like I said, I'm out on the road. I didn't call till the end of the day. So she had no clue, no way to get a hold of me or nothing. Long story short, later on that night, I called her, and she was just so relieved to hear from me. I guess as she got talking to the detective a little more and inquiring a little more about the officer's story, she started asking, and he asked her, I can't remember which, you know, "Is your husband 57? And well, back then I was in my early 20s. I was like 21, I think. Heck. And that let her know it wasn't me, but she was hysterical. And I called her up that night on the phone, and she couldn't help but break down crying after I called her. And it kind of opened my eyes and made me think of her a little more, you know. I broke out the map book, and I explained to her the route that I take each week. And I made it a point to where she understood where I was each day, and where I was going to be shutting down, which states I was going to be going through, just to give her a peace of mind. And heck, nowadays she can route plan just as good as anybody. But back then, like I said, she had no clue, and it had to be scary for her. I mean, I felt so bad. I just wanted to give her a hug, but heck, I was already on the East Coast by then. And till this day, I really don't know if that Gerald Johnson ever got found, or I'm just praying he did. All right, that's kind of my story, and I'm not going to make it any longer than it has to be. That's one that just always comes to mind because I felt so bad for her. I got a couple others. Maybe one of these days I'll share them. But if any of you guys, I mean, there's a lot of people on here that have been driving just as long as I have, or a lot of you that have been doing it longer. Heck, please feel free to share with these younger drivers. I mean, I'm sure they'd be glad to hear some original stories. All right, thanks again for watching. Y'all be safe out there.